I'm really sorry that Emma, the groom's younger sister, is part of our family. To be honest, Emma only finished middle school, which in my opinion doesn't fit well with our family's reputation. I think she should avoid family gatherings and be mindful of her social status when interacting with us. During the family representative speech at the wedding, the bride's father, with an unpleasant grin, said something surprising that left us all shocked. None of us expected such words to be spoken in front of everyone at the wedding, and we were left speechless. Suddenly, the groom stood up and approached the bride's father with a seemingly friendly smile. However, it was clear that he was angry from our family's perspective. My father also got involved, so I stood up to intervene. I'm Emma Brown, and I work at a well-known construction company in our town. It was tough at first, because it's mostly guys, but I become friends with the carpenter and even the strict foreman. He's strict, but I respect him because he's passionate about teaching his skills to younger people. After everyone left the construction site, I realized I'd been working non-stop since lunch. My stomach growled loudly, and I found some sandwiches with a note from the foreman telling me to have a proper meal. It made me smile, and I took the sandwiches. I finished my work and headed back to the apartment provided by the company. My phone rang, and it was my brother, whom I hadn't spoken to in years. He's always been talented and is now a surgeon at the biggest hospital in our hometown, affiliated with the university. It was a call from my respected brother, and I took a deep breath when I heard my brother's voice on the phone. I felt a bit nervous in my trembling voice. I asked what's going on. All of a sudden, my brother, with a somewhat embarrassed tone, explained that he had decided to marry his current partner and really wanted me to come to the wedding. We hadn't seen each other in years, and he thought it was a good opportunity. I replied, of course, and he smiled with joy. After briefly catching up, we reluctantly hung up the phone, suppressing feelings of nostalgia. I didn't know much about my brother's partner. I assumed they had already met our parents, so I planned to talk to them before the wedding as I pondered these thoughts. I couldn't help but feel happy. I decided to warm up the sandwiches the foreman had given me and enjoy my meal. They tasted even better than usual that day. Later, I received the wedding invitation from my brother, and I talked to the foreman about taking some time off. He gave me his consent with a condition: I had to be a guest lecturer at a specialized construction school for 3 days. It seems someone had requested this, and I was unsure about my ability to handle the task. The foreman encouraged me, saying I could do it, which gave me determination as promised. I arrived at the school on the designated day. It turned out to be a beautiful campus, and I was in awe after entering and speaking to the receptionist. I was directed to a preparation room for guest lecturers. While reviewing my lecture content,
if you want to hear more, then please subscribe and like the video. Thank you.
A man entered the room. I greeted him as Emma from the construction company, but he stared at me. He seemed to doubt my abilities, mentioning how they couldn't easily share skills with a woman. Frustrated, I looked back at him and said that gender doesn't matter in any industry. Good work is achieved regardless. When individual personalities come together, making dismissive comments about women while working in a specialized construction school is absolutely unacceptable. Such attitudes contribute to the persistence of gender inequality in our world. We should refrain from passing on rigid prejudices to the young people entering the field of architecture. I casually assured the man that I wouldn't approach my role as a guest lecturer for 3 days. I promised to make those 3 days meaningful for the students. My words seemed to frustrate him, as if he couldn't stand women who showed confidence after breaking barriers in male-dominated fields. He walked away in annoyance, and I decided to give my best during my lectures, inspiring the students to look forward to the next one. With a burning passion in my heart, I entered the classroom for the lecture and successfully completed my 3-day stand as a guest lecturer, receiving fond farewells from the students I had grown close to. Before returning to the construction company, I informed the forum about the content of my lectures and the disrespectful remarks made by the person in charge on the first day. The foreman, after listening to my story, simply said there were no specific criticisms, which made me happy. I returned to my apartment, skipping with joy. Finally, the long-awaited day of my brother's wedding arrived. My parents had gathered at a hotel near the wedding venue, and my brother's fiancée, Emmy White, was a skilled nurse who worked at the same hospital as my brother. She was responsible for taking care of patients and assisting doctors in the operating room and dressing room at the venue. I found the dress my mother had prepared, though it was different from what I usually wear. My mother skillfully took charge of my makeup and hairstyling. As I looked in the mirror, I felt too embarrassed to lift my face, but my parents complimented me on how cute I looked. In the family waiting room, I noticed a man, Kenny White, who turned out to be Emmy's father and the same person who had ridiculed me at the specialized school, did my best to conceal my discomfort. We exchanged pleasantries, and he commented on how lovely I looked. However, when he asked about my education, I replied that I had only graduated from middle school and started working for personal reasons. His expression briefly turned distorted, but he quickly returned to a smile, saying, "I see, that's interesting." As the wedding ceremony began, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of unease, perhaps due to a brief change in expression from someone in the crowd. But my focus shifted to the beautiful ceremony itself. Emmy looked even more stunning than I had imagined in her pure white wedding dress, and my brother dressed in matching all tuxedo was incredibly dashing. Their union made me smile warmly. As we transitioned to the reception, my father started to look flustered and concerned. I asked him what was wrong, and it turned out that my brother had asked him to deliver the family's representative speech. My father was wiping sweat from his brow and checking his notes, but my mother and I shared a knowing smile. The speech from the bride's family representative began before my father's turn. Kenny, the bride's father, seemed to be in high spirits, possibly due to seeing his daughter as a bride. He had consumed quite a bit of alcohol and appeared somewhat unsteady as he was supported by the bride's mother. Eventually, he stood up and made his way to the microphone. Despite being somewhat drunk, Kenny stood confidently in front of the microphone, which struck me as different from my father's demeanor. With a smirk on his face, he began his speech, thanking everyone for gathering to celebrate his daughter's wedding. However, Kenny made a shocking statement expressing his deep disappointment that the younger sister Emma of the groom was connected to their outstanding family. He went on to say that someone like Emma, who only had a middle school education, was a disgrace to the family, and in his opinion, she should stay away from family gatherings and be mindful of her social status when interacting with them. These words left my father and my mother utterly speechless as Kenny's words sank in. I recalled his earlier expression, and a sense of frustration welled up within me. My brother, visibly upset, abruptly approached Kenny with a calm smile, but firm determination. Although it was clear that my brother was unhappy, he maintained composure. When I saw him raising his arm, I stood up to intervene and stop him. My brother, however, maintained his fixed smile and took the microphone from Kenny. He questioned Kenny about whether he knew my sister's profession and her role as a lecturer at a specialized school. My brother mentioned that Emma was a master carpenter involved in restoring old architectural structures such as churches. Kenny, unable to comprehend the meaning of the question, mumbled a confused response. This only fueled my brother's persistence. He emphasized Emma's expertise and asked if Kenny knew about her dedication to preserving architectural heritage. In response, Kenny started trembling and shouted angrily at my brother, expressing surprise at how a woman could hold the title of master carpenter. Kenny continued to create a scene, seemingly forgetting that there were other guests at the reception. My brother, still wearing a smile, responded firmly, saying Emma is a genuine master carpenter, trained under the human national treasure Mr. Herbert Smith. Are you suggesting that she can't handle it just because she's a woman? You were the one who reached out to him in the first place. Why didn't you get him out? My brother gestured towards someone, and I followed his gaze to the master carpenter, sitting quietly in a less conspicuous corner. I was left speechless with astonishment. The foreman, who had been silent up to that point, grinned when he made eye contact with my brother and sent a piercing stare in Kenny's direction. The foreman, known for his thunderous voice, spoke out. You're in a position to guide the young folks who will shape the future of the construction industry, yet you harbor such twisted prejudices. Kenny, I've heard about what was said when our Emma went to teach at your school, but this is on a whole other level. Whether it's a woman or a man doesn't matter, it's about leveraging each person's strengths to cooperate and become the best we can be. If you keep going on about how it's a man's world, you'll be left behind by the times. My brother also added. I said the best apprentice for this task was available. You think I'm underestimating things? If anything comes from where I stand, you're the one underestimating us. Kenny, intimidated by the foreman's thunderous voice, turned pale and muttered an apology before returning to his seat. The venue remained agitated for a while, but eventually Emmy stood up with a composed voice and apologized for the interruption. She suggested a short break before resuming the reception. When the reception continued, Emmy's parents were no longer present, and the atmosphere improved. We closed the event with smiles after the reception. I asked Foreman about the situation. He explained that Kenny had asked him to attend his daughter's wedding several times, and he reluctantly agreed. I thought that it would have been nice if he had mentioned it to me. The foreman scratched his head and said he didn't think there was any need to say it. He believed that Kenny wanted to establish a connection with him even though it happened by chance. My older brother then arrived and thanked the foreman for responding to the unexpected situation. The foreman responded with a smile. "She is my top disciple, so being silent when someone goes that far is just unreasonable." He patted my head, and it triggered memories of the past. I was captivated by the work of a carpenter during my elementary school days. Whenever I had unpleasant experiences at home or school, I sought solace by visiting an old church. It was during one of these visits that I discovered the foremen who were repairing the church. Watching their beautiful craftsmanship, I became utterly captivated. I started researching the history of old buildings, like churches, and visited them in person. As I grew up, I sought out books about carpentry techniques and devoured their contents. I was completely captivated by it all, and when I reached middle school, I made a significant decision. I decided to have a conversation with my parents about it. My decision was to become an apprentice to a master carpenter specializing in old-style construction and learn the craft to become a top-notch carpenter myself. However, my father strongly objected, believing it to be a difficult path for a woman and suggesting more suitable career choices. He shook his head and refused to agree, but I couldn't give up, and I continued to persuade my parents day after day. One day, seeing my determination, my mother came into my room. I had been defeated by my father's arguments and was lying face down on my bed. Sitting at the edge of the bed, my mother gently stroked my head and said she understood the whole path I had chosen. She mentioned that she wouldn't oppose it, but emphasized that I needed to show my determination to my father. After some contemplation, I felt that this path was the only one for me. I visited the construction company and lowered my head to the foreman, who had already gained recognition as a living national treasure at that time. I asked him to take me as his apprentice. At first, I was turned away from a place where women weren't traditionally allowed to enter. However, I persisted for several months, waiting for the foreman to come out, bowing my head each time during the winter of my second year in middle school. After numerous attempts at pleading, the foreman finally burst into laughter. He approached me, surprising me, and said he was going to visit my parents. When the foreman came to our house, my parents were bewildered, but he bowed deeply in front of them and expressed his belief in me. He stated that this young woman will surely become a top-notch carpenter someday. I can see a burning passion in her eyes. Please believe in me and entrust your daughter to me. The foreman looked at me with kindness and gently placed his hand on my head. Despite my father's initial reluctance, my mother, tears welling up in her eyes, asked the foreman to take care of me. Seeing this, my father also lowered his head toward the foreman, holding back tears. My older brother, who had witnessed many arguments between me and my father, looked at us with an indescribable expression. A memory I still vividly recall to this day. However, even with the determination to pursue my dream, the days that followed were not all filled with enjoyable moments. After graduating from middle school, and with my parents' permission, I moved into the apartment provided by the construction company to start learning the job. Initially, I was often assigned to physically demanding tasks like site cleanup and struggled to keep up with my senior colleagues. Every time work was delayed because of me, my colleagues got frustrated and made remarks about women being ill-suited for this. Nevertheless, I refused to be discouraged. I watched and learned from the foreman, and my senior colleagues occasionally received guidance from the foreman himself. Before I knew it, I had grown to the point where I could handle tasks alongside my senior colleagues. They started acknowledging my skills and began interacting with me more warmly. I found enjoyment in my work, and to my surprise, the foreman declared me as his top disciple. I was overjoyed, but he reminded me not to get too carried away, emphasizing that there was still much to learn. While my older brother watched this exchange, he chuckled and looked me in the eye, saying, "Emma, there's something I've wanted to say for a long time. Seeing you face your dream of becoming a carpenter head-on and working hard to make it a reality made me realize that I could achieve more and inspired me to aim for the highest level in my own studies, eventually becoming a doctor to help many people. If I hadn't witnessed your determination that day, my life would have been much less fulfilling, so thank you truly." As my brother said this, I tightly squeezed his outstretched hand, trying to hold back tears. It felt like a warm sensation was flowing into my heart, and both our parents and the foreman were watching us, brother and sister, with kind eyes. In the end, after the incident with Kenny and his fear of disappointing the living national treasure foreman, Kenny faced his first setback, having never experienced failure before. Having graduated from a prestigious university, he struggled to recover from it. Eventually, he decided to step down from his position as the chairman of an educational institution, passing it on to his successor. Emmy shared this with me when she came to apologize to me once again. She was tired of her father's obsession with academic achievements and her mother's accommodation of that mindset. When I saw Amy confidently laugh and declare that she was cutting ties with them, I exchanged a knowing smile with my brother, both of us chuckling. I continued to learn the craftsmanship of a carpenter under the foreman while working harmoniously with my senior colleagues. In reality, I also took on another job teaching carpentry techniques at a construction-focused vocational school. This job was formally requested after receiving requests from students who had previously taken my special lectures. I now teach twice a week, and both of my jobs are fulfilling. I lead a very satisfying life. One day, when I reported about my work at the vocational school, the foreman suddenly burst into laughter. His face was full of joy. He said that if I hadn't met you, I probably wouldn't have allowed women on the construction site. Even now, I never thought about passing on my skills to people with such different aspirations as this. You're the one who changed me. Watching the foreman laugh like that, I couldn't help but smile. I felt a warmth spreading through my heart and thought to myself that it was a good decision to work here as time went on. My role as both a carpenter and a teacher at the vocational school allowed me to make a significant impact on the construction industry. I was living proof that determination and a strong work ethic could break down barriers. My presence encouraged more women to consider careers in carpentry and construction, gradually reshaping the industry's perception. The foreman, once hesitant about including women in the construction field, became a mentor and a friend. He admired my passion and dedication, and I continued to learn from his wisdom and expertise. Our close bond created a harmonious work environment, inspiring others to see the value of diversity in the construction trade. My relationship with my family improved too. My father, initially skeptical of my chosen path, gradually began to understand the significance of my work. He saw how I had embraced my dream and succeeded, and he eventually came to admire my determination. My mother, who had supported me from the beginning, was proud of the woman I had become. My brother and I grew closer together through our shared experiences and the lessons we had learned from each other in the midst of my busy life, my family support, and the camaraderie at the construction company. I found fulfillment in both my personal and professional lives. Every day was a reminder of the journey I had taken from a determined middle school graduate to a respected master carpenter and teacher. The challenges I faced only strengthened my resolve and shaped me into the person I had always wanted to be, and so I continued to work passionately, sharing my skills and knowledge with a new generation of carpenters and breaking down stereotypes within the construction industry. The legacy of determination and progress that I had started would continue to impact the lives of many, just as my brother's words had inspired me to pursue my dreams.